more of the same, because last year was just more of the same in terms of that old proverbial thing we've heard time and time again about kicking the can down the road. John and I have talked about that a great deal as gubernatorial candidates. He's got to do three things. It's time. He's got to focus on spending with laser-like focus on pensions and the post-retirement health care benefit. He's got to focus on improving the business climate. Last year, in my opinion, his budget address and the new policies made our business climate in New Jersey only worse. And he's got to accelerate school funding reforms, or we're never going to be able to address the property tax crisis. My hope is he'll address those three things in this budget address.
Well, the problem is that while I agree in principle with a lot of what Jack is saying, how you get there is very different. And
that's the threading the needle part,
That's
right?
the threading the needle, because while we do need to do better on pension and benefits and health care, and we do need to do better on school funding, we have to make sure that we're not doing it at the expense of the people who have relied upon it, who have played by the rules, who are depending on the state being there for them. And I think one of the problems I have with what the Path to Progress is talking about is basically throwing in the towel, saying, hey, we can't be the kind of state that we ought to be, so let's just go back to a very conservative, basic level of government service, which is not what the people of New Jersey want.
Well, listen, in some respects, John's right. We shouldn't change the rules midstream for those people that are within 10 years of retirement. But if you're more than 10 years of retirement or you're a new hire, what is so hard about changing our health care plan?
Well,
or our pension plan?
how are you going to change it? What differences would, let's say, a Governor Citarelli
Listen, our pensions are in deficit for three reasons. One, we haven't funded them. Two, because I think they're too generous, especially compared to the private sector. And three, because people are living too long. We can no longer afford to define the benefit. You hear that, a defined benefit plan. We can't do that any longer. All new hires and those with less than 5 or 10 years in the system, we're going over to a 401k. That's a simple thing to do, right? And if someone's pension plus their Social Security is above a certain threshold, shouldn't they contribute more to their post-retirement health care benefit? You're talking about billions of dollars in savings over the long term with just those two little changes, which we've seen time and again in the private sector.
The unions are going to love that, John.
See, I was surprised. I was surprised. Jack talked about three things, and he came out against long life.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not against long life. I think people should live.
I'm sorry, I have to agree with John on this one.
But the fact of the matter is there are three reasons we have the problem we're in. We didn't fund the pension, we didn't fund the pension, and we didn't fund the pension. I sat in the legislature for 22 years, and I remember at my first budget hearing the rhetoric from then Governor Christie Whitman talking about how our pension system was overfunded, and it would be wrong to take taxpayer dollars and continue to fund the pension. And then we got into a bad habit.
Still got to fund the pension.
He's not wrong about Christie Todd Whitman. He's right. She was wrong about what she did with the pension. But during the Jim McGreevey and John Corzine years, there were years, and NJEA was complicit in this. There were years when the contribution to the pension was zero, when they were boosting school funding by the billions, and NJEA was complicit in that. We're here today for a lot of different reasons, but we can fix it. We just got to make the bold, tough decisions.
Does that include revenue generators? I would imagine that you're a no new taxes guy, as is just about everybody in the legislature, at least on record. They're saying no new taxes, but to fund all of these priorities, you're going to have to generate some revenue somewhere.
Where we're not funding new priorities, we're finding ways that the private sector uses to address old priorities, which is funding the pension, making the pension solvent over the long term. I don't think
college education, those kind of things that are
those to me, all the new funding for pre-K and free community college, nice priorities. But this is not the time and the place.
What doesn't get said is we gave the taxpayers, the legislature, the governor, a almost $1 billion tax break when we did away with the so-called death tax.
Right.
$700 million slated to come into the budget. And so when you take that money out, and at the same time, you're having problems funding your pension and funding education, it's no wonder New Jersey winds up triaging and taking money from everything just to get things done. When we talk about a 401k, it's a great concept. Everybody has a 401k. The practical reality is that the pension system today depends on that money coming in. You switch people out right now into a 401k, the pension system will collapse on itself. And so they're good soundbite answers, but they're not necessarily strategic answers.
Our pension was never supposed to be transgenerational like Social Security, where today's workers are paying for yesterday's retirees. By the way, last year we raised taxes, the corporate business tax. We raised income taxes, a whole new bracket for our most successful citizens. And Murphy is experiencing a significant budget revenue shortfall. Significant revenue shortfall. They expected revenues to grow 7.5%. If you take out Craig Goffin's tax amnesty plan, they're growing at 1.3%. That was reported in this morning's Star Ledger. We are beginning to see what's happening when you make this high tax state even more high tax. Businesses won't do business here, and our most successful people will move out. And that's putting an unbelievable strain.
Outward migration real?
Outward migration is real.